This is the current Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese.
Well, hang on. Sit down.
I'm
sit
still
down.
hearing
You sit
from-
down, Buffett.
And he's done some pretty good things for the country. Now, I'm not going to give a whole political spiel about the wrongs and rights of the Anthony Albanese government, but, he has brought inflation down from 6% to 3% in his office in only just about 3 or 4 years, and that's a great improvement from the 9 years of Liberal government that we've had before. Additionally, he's also managed to secure us a 10% tariff rate from the US, which is really good, and it really has held up quite strong, and our relations with the US are quite strong at the moment. Obviously, there are obvious issues. The housing crisis, the supermarket prices, they're really bad. But there is one thing that he has done which I think will actually be his hamartia. Hamartia being his fatal flaw. I actually voted for Albo and the Labor Party because I support them on the whole. But what I don't support is their social media ban for under 16s. Not necessarily in principle, but the way in which it's been carried out and the way that the government plans to intend on implementing the ban. So if you don't know, the Labor Party and the Australian Parliament has come to the agreement that they want to ban social media for under 16s. But the thing is, old people, when you look at them, they don't really understand technology. They don't use it like young people do. And therefore there's this dissonance, where you've got this dissonance between the people up in the government, working, typing away, making laws, they know the law, and then you've actually got the users and the people who are using social media on the daily and use it for their purposes. For example, here are just a few clips of politicians trying to talk about technology and failing terribly. For example, here's Boris Johnson trying to say AI.
I love AI. Do you use AI?
Absolutely.
Do you use ChatGPT? Do you love ChatGPT? I love ChatGPT. I love it.
Here's a clip of Trump's Secretary of Education saying AI, actually calling it A1.
That there is a school system that's going to start making sure that first graders or even pre-Ks have A1 teaching, every year starting, that far down in the grades. And that's a wonderful thing.
But what exactly is the ban?
What the government's purpose of this legislation seeks to do is to give children their childhood back.
We want young Australians essentially to have a childhood. We want parents to have peace of mind. Today, our government has introduced legislation to create a new minimum age of 16 for access to social media. Social media has a social responsibility. And as a government, we have a responsibility to keep our young Australians safe.
And to a large part, I do agree with that. I do think social media has some severe harms in terms of people using it too much and not understanding how much it can really lead to addiction. But what I don't agree is how they're going about it. So let's read the legislation about it. The legislation is called the Social Media Minimum Age Act, and this is the fact sheet. So some of the key features of the SMMA, which is what the legislation is called, include requiring age-restricted social media platforms to take reasonable steps to prevent Australians under 16 years old from having accounts. This is the minimum age obligation, they call it. The question is, though, what is a reasonable step? And, to what extent are companies actually going to enforce that? Obviously, they are held legally liable, and if they're found compromising this legislation, they will have to pay fines of, I believe it was $50 million. The amount will be right here. But yeah, I just don't think that companies, obviously they have to care, but I don't think companies necessarily are enforced as much as they need to by just claiming reasonable steps. It also introduces issues with digital ID and identity theft. Because if we're handing all this data over to all these social media companies, like our driver's license, what's to stop that database being breached? I know with Facebook, when you upload your ID to get it verified, they say they keep that data for up to a year for storage. But the question is, why do they need to keep that data? Instead, what I would recommend the government do is establish either a national age verification check program through MyGov, which they already have established, or what I'd actually like to see more so is like software verification checks from Apple and Android, as I think those are a lot more secure and a lot safer than handing over your data to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all those sorts of platforms. So I do need to clarify one thing that's a little bit tricky, in that the government and the law actually specifies that social media platforms can't actually use government ID. They must not. So it's off the table. Now that does bring into question as to how the reasonable steps are otherwise going to be found. Like, how are they going to do it? How are they going to use algorithms? Because right now, Face ID, it doesn't work. It can't work. Face verification checks don't work. So it'll be very interesting to see how they actually end up implementing it. Additionally, it also says that they can't use digital ID, which has been thrown out a lot recently. So no, they cannot use your government ID like MyGov, which is a bit unfortunate really, because it seems like that would be the most obvious solution. I guess people do want privacy in what they use online, but I don't know. I think that's the most obvious solution. So yes, it is a very big issue, but no, they're not allowed to use your government issued ID or force you to use it. So that's very interesting, because right now some companies do use that. I mean, I know for Facebook Marketplace, when I got banned because I was allegedly under 18, I wasn't. I was actually 18. I had to submit my ID and I had no choice otherwise, because the age verification check, it didn't work. It simply didn't work. I was 18. I scanned my face. They said, nope, we can't tell because you look like you could be 16. You look like you could be 17. How do we know you're 18? And it gets even worse if you're 16, because a 16-year-old, the difference in how they look is very minor between 15, 16, 17, 18. Like, there's no difference. So yeah, the current solutions are not working, and not being able to use your government-issued ID, that doesn't help either. Now, they do specify that no Australian will be compelled to use government identification, including digital ID, to prove their age online, and platforms must offer reasonable alternatives to users. But the problem is, if you are not compelled or not forced to use that, you're already being forced into other alternative solutions. One of such being facial recognition, which is proven to be false over time. The next thing that I find issue with on the fact sheet is that Australians under the age of 16 will be unable to hold an account with an age-restricted social media platform in their own right. This also applies to existing account holders who are under the minimum age at the moment. So if you're 15 right now, unlucky, you're going to have to wait a year. However, they will not be prevented from accessing content on an age-restricted social media service in a logged-out state, i.e. without logging into an account or profile. Now, this raises multiple questions. So, Anthony Albanese wants children to have a life. He wants them to, theoretically, get outside, involve themselves in the community, and yet you can still access all these social media platforms in a logged out state. YouTube, I'll get to that later, is one of the most obvious ones. But let's talk about Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Right now, you can use TikTok in a logged out state. Facebook and Instagram you can't. But what if they just change that feature? Obviously, they're not going to have your data and they're not going to be able to ascribe it to a profile, but they still have storage which caches your information and gives you the same algorithms that would normally be ascribed to an account. That's an issue. You're not changing anything. The only thing you're changing is the ability for users to post, but not necessarily to interact with their content. And I think there's been a big issue with social media and the manosphere, which has arisen recently. So you can talk about figures like Andrew Tate. I'm not going to get into the whole politics of it. Obviously, he's done some pretty nasty things, it seems, but I'm not going to go there. But you've got these content and these leaders and role models online, these influencers, who are negative impacts upon children, and they influence their ideas about body image, most notably, and influence their ideas about what's right and what's wrong. But to have users and social media users under the age of 16 be in a logged out state, it poses other warnings, especially considering some platforms already have protections that identify under 16s, and they can put those in place. But let's say you've got the scenario where you can't use it while you're logged in, or you can't use, kids features, because that would suggest that the platform and the social media platform is actually going against the law. So they're going to have to get rid of YouTube for Kids. They're going to have to get rid of parental controls on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, because, you shouldn't be under 16 and using parental controls. So they'll have to get rid of that in Australia. So what that does is it actually means that their algorithm is probably going to be catered towards more adult content if they are using these social media accounts in a logged out state. Obviously, all of this is speculation at the moment, as the legislation hasn't actually been implemented yet. It comes in December. But when we're talking about platforms like TikTok, where you can currently use it logged out, I'd be cautious to say that, what's stopping TikTok from just letting users use the platform logged out like they can right now, and then, they don't get punished for it and under 16s can still use the platform? Or are they going to force people to sign into an account, which will require age verification, which goes against the very statement that they said, however, they will not be prevented from accessing content on age-restricted social media services in a logged-out state? There's just so many contradictions in this legislation, because I think there is that dissonance between the legislators, the technology companies, and the users themselves. So let's talk about the major platforms that they've banned right now. So they've banned Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, X, and YouTube. Now, for the most part, I agree with Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and X. I agree in principle. Obviously, we've had plenty of discussion about how it's actually going to be implemented, but that's another question. YouTube, though. YouTube is not social media. I think most people would agree that it's actually more so a resource, an online resource that people can use to access videos. It's more like Netflix. It's more entertainment. It's not necessarily social media, which usually involves users posting their own content more generally than creators creating their own. So that's one thing that I don't agree with at all. Additionally, the YouTube community is generally pretty good. It's pretty safe, and a lot of the issues regarding suicide, body image, all those sorts of issues, they kind of stay away from YouTube, from what I know. Obviously, that is anecdotal experience, but I think most people would agree that YouTube actually has mostly benefits to young people. They can learn educational content, they can entertain themselves. There's plenty of uses for YouTube, and it's not one of these threatening platforms. Obviously, there are issues with bots and bot comments on YouTube, but those are generally more so targeted towards creators who are actually interacting with them, and YouTube does make efforts to try and remove them. Additionally, YouTube for Kids is actually a platform that they have to restrict age-limited content, so yeah, I don't know why they're doing this. But let's talk more importantly about the platforms that they've added recently, which really shows the dissonance between the government and actual use of technology amongst teens. I'm 18 right now, so I won't be affected too much. Obviously, my audience is, I think, 15% under 18, so I might be impacted a little bit, but obviously they can still access YouTube without an account. But let's talk about first the list of other apps that they're adding to the list. First of all, they've added Kick. Kick is the streaming platform, which is basically Twitch. But weirdly, they haven't banned Twitch because, I don't know, they seem to don't understand that they offer the same purpose. Obviously, Kick allows gambling online, but that's not the purpose of this legislation. This legislation is to protect the youth and their, I guess, mental health. That's probably what they're intending to do with this legislation. So banning Kick, but not Twitch, doesn't change anything necessarily. And the fact that Twitch is not getting banned and YouTube is, that doesn't sit right with me. Twitch has had many allegations of sexual profanity and nudity on their site over the years, and I just don't think it's a safe platform for kids. I think YouTube is far safer, and if they had anyone who actually used these platforms, they would understand that.
And just to show the hypocrisy of getting rid of Kick in Australia but not Twitch, is this side-by-side comparison of both of their platforms. So you can see down the left-hand side you have live channels, up the top right you've got sign up, you've got just chatting there, the categories are exactly the same. You've got streams like Marlon, he's just streaming I guess, he's not a great role model either. But then you go over Kick, and then you see just chatting, exactly the same place. The channels down the left-hand side, same format. Up the top right, you have login, sign up. It looks identical. It even uses the same servers. That is Amazon Warehouse Services. Seriously, come on government, it's not that hard.
But then they also banned Reddit. Now, I kind of agree with Reddit, but I do agree in the tech community that it can be useful for finding solutions. Obviously, you can use it in a logged out state, they say. So I don't know how that's actually going to change anything. The fact that you can use it in a logged out state in the legislation doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to enforce the ban. Obviously, they're going to look at user content and look at what the user is actually engaging with to assess and take reasonable steps to see if a person is under the age of 16, but that's all just inference. But they've also said that they're looking at other communities like Roblox. Roblox is not social media, it's a game. It's a game. It has a chat function, but it's a game. Now, obviously, aside from all the predatory stuff which has been revealed about Roblox over the years, obviously Penguin Zero, Moist Critical has made many videos on it, there is a big issue with that. But that is not social media. It is strictly not social media. It's a game, you chat with them, and they haven't included in this list, but they have said that they're looking at it. But one of the apps they haven't included is Discord, and this is terrible. They should have included Discord. Now, obviously, it's not necessarily a social media app because, you're not posting any content online. You're really just using it as a chat application to interact with communities. However, it is one of the most grotesque communities a lot of the time. It can be used for good, but I'd say a lot of the time it's also used for some pretty bad stuff. I know Knox Grammar School in Sydney actually had some big issues with CP being shared on the platform, and this is just like an example of what Discord can be used for. So them not banning Discord, but then also deciding to ban Twitch, it doesn't really make sense. You can chat in Twitch, but you can also chat in Discord. Discord, I think, probably should have been included. I just think that this whole social media idea and the idea that you have to restrict it inherently to social media is just a bit... It just reduces the potential for the legislation to actually create genuine change. Now, what they've also said is that monitoring other platforms like Steam. Steam is a gaming platform. It's not social media. It's for games. You download games, you play with your friends, there are chat functions, but it's not social media. So the social media harms that they've been talking about, like body image, suicidality, they're all separate from Steam. Steam is not a form of social media, and to ban Steam would just be pretty devastating, really. Like, I don't know, it's just not social media. They don't understand what the people use Steam for. But I think what this entire legislation misses is the real harms of social media and more so technology. I think one of the biggest issues facing young people, and especially young boys, is actually pornography usage. It's rampant online and it's so easy, it's just at the click of a button. And the fact that you can still access it in Australia, but you can't access social media, it's just befuddling to me. It just doesn't make sense. You're restricting content which has the potential for good, instead of bad content that really just doesn't benefit society as a whole. I think they really need to reconsider what this social media ban is intending to do and exactly how they're going to implement it. Now, Australian government. This is a cookie. Now, cookies, they taste pretty good. Now, cookies online take a little bit of a different meaning. In terms of your data is stored in cookies, either hosted by the third party, or most usually on your Google Chrome web browser. Now, the thing about cookies is they store information about you. So let's say I log into YouTube. I'm on a new account, blank slate. Let's say I Google a video about Minecraft. Okay? Click on one video, start watching it. The next time I watch YouTube, I'm going to open up that page and it's going to show me Minecraft. What's going to happen then? I'll click on Minecraft. I'm not signed in, by the way. The only thing that's happening is the cookies are storing that data. So nothing's actually changed about YouTube because they can still access all my data. They still feed me the same aggressive algorithms, theoretically. And yeah, I'm still using it like I was before, even though I'm under 16 and I'm in a logged out state, which is actually less safe because I can't use the YouTube for Kids mode. So I might end up down an alt-right pipeline
Listening to people like Jordan Peterson.
That was a good cookie. So what might actually happen is these cookies might actually just feed me the exact same content and nothing changes because they're still collecting my data. It's just being stored in my cookies, not in my YouTube profile. And therefore, I'm still using the platform in exactly the same way as I was before the social media ban, but I don't have an account, and also the parents can't monitor my usage through the YouTube Kids app or parental controls. So, yeah, not a great move. So, my inquiry to the Albanese government is, do you think that this is actually going to be implemented well enough to create change? Or will it just be another blunder for the Albanese government, for the Murdoch press to jump on for the next election? I definitely support the overall message. I do think social media has great harms, but this is not the way to go about it. The way to go about it is to actually consult young people and actually see how they would see fit to reduce social media usage. I know this was a little bit of a different video, but thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And yeah, leave your comments down below on your thoughts on the ban.